So it has to start with you, because you can't actually allow someone else to be deeply close with you if you haven't gone intimacy with yourself. And our whole society is based on measuring ourselves. Like, we think, okay, well, my worth is based on, like, I have to measure myself, and there's some sort of compare and contrast with others around me. But how do you measure feminine energy? Any part of you that you have felt like you have to sacrifice in order to fit into any relationship in your life is a lie. And I would just invite you to do whatever you can to reclaim those parts of yourself and gather up and make yourself whole again.
On this episode of Calmly Coping, I had the pleasure of speaking with Melisa Keenan. She is an intuitive intimacy expert who works with high achieving spiritual CEOs to help them find balance and fulfillment in both their personal and professional lives. Melissa is a keynote speaker and a best-selling author who understands the challenges that come with feeling trapped in the masculine energy paradigm of doing and busyness. In this episode, we explored a range of topics, including how to cultivate deeper closeness and fulfillment in both your relationships and your professional life. And we delved into the concept of masculine and feminine energy and how understanding these dynamics can have a profound impact on your personal and professional relationships. Melissa also shared her insights on transitioning from a performance oriented workplace to a more heart driven lifestyle and how to get to know your intuition and align with your values. So, whether you're a high achieving professional or simply looking to deepen your connections, this episode is a must listen for anyone interested in finding balance, connection, and fulfillment in their personal and professional lives. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this insightful conversation with Melisa Keenan. Hey, Tati here, and welcome to Calmly Coping. I am here with Melisa Keenan, intimacy expert. It is great to have you here with us, Melissa. So, first, to kind of get into things, can you let us know what an intimacy expert is?
Well, it's a good question, because I've had people say, look at you, you just made up a thing and now you do it. And it's kind of true. Um, the way that I serve is may or may not be the way that another intimacy coach or intimacy expert might serve. But I help women and couples with experiencing the depth of intimacy. So it has to do with sensuality and sex, yes, but that's like a part and piece. It's also about emotional, mental, spiritual ability to be open and connected with others. And we talk about reclamation of sensuality. We also talk a lot about intuition, and we talk a lot about masculine and feminine energy and that polarity that exists in us and in relationships. So I'm typically helping people kind of open up the depth that's inside of them. And that has a ripple effect that might affect their business and affect their, overall experience of life, their leadership, so many aspects of themselves.
Great. Yeah. So it sounds like it really encompasses a lot when it comes to, like, would you say, is it just in relationships with other people? Or is that something that can be cultivated on your own?
Intimacy with yourself is something I talk a lot about, and it's not maybe a term that people are familiar with, especially because we misunderstand what intimacy is. So it's sort of like, wait, what are you talking about? But I kind of define or break down intimacy as into me see. So it has to start with you, because you can't actually allow someone else to be deeply close with you if you haven't gone intimacy with yourself. You also can't deeply see into someone else if you haven't seen deeply into yourself. So it's this like reciprocal relationship. We can really only love another as deeply as we love ourselves. So it is hugely an inside job.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really powerful. So, how does somebody cultivate intimacy? Like, what does that look like?
It really is different for everyone, because we all are at a sort of different starting point, right? But most of us kind of have no context at all. Most of us know that we want deeper closeness and connection, or maybe just more fulfillment, or we thought relationships were going to have something more there, and we can't quite put our finger on what it feels like is missing. And unfortunately, our society has really worked against us for this. Like, we haven't been set up for success because typically our parents didn't know how to experience true intimacy and connection. And they didn't really raise us with true intimacy and connection. And then we get out into the work world, we become adults, right? And it's like we're almost expected to be robotic. So we kind of are a little at a loss for what is this thing I want. And I just was working with a couple last week, and I told them, the more I've gotten to know you guys, the more I can see, that there's something. And I gave them this imagery. It's like you're going for a target, but it's surrounded by landmines. So they keep trying to come in toward each other and towards this goal in the center, but they keep hitting all these landmines. And then they immediately think something's wrong with me, something's wrong with us, something's wrong with our marriage, this is never going to work. But in reality, they have no idea how to navigate these landmines. So intimacy, it's very interesting. We all say we want it, and then we all put up lots of guards against actually experiencing it, because it can be vulnerable, it can be painful at times. It is a space of real authenticity. It can feel very scary. So, yeah, I didn't exactly answer your question. In a roundabout way, I answered your question.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, because I'm hearing that intimacy, like you mentioned, it looks different for everybody. And it's also having a deeper relationship and connection with others. And that, a lot of us aren't taught how to have intimate relationships because, I would imagine maybe it's something that's generational because our parents, our grandparents weren't taught those things. And so then we kind of grow up and then realize, like, I don't know what to do, and then can feel this shame that there's something wrong with us because we feel distant from the people that we love.
Yeah, exactly. And then, not just due to our upbringing. Like, we may have had one very loving and tender parent, for example, or a grandparent, or somebody in our life who we felt like, no matter who I was or no matter what I did, I was loved and accepted. I could be myself. I could tell them anything. But we feel like that's some sort of anomaly. And we also tend to feel like there's no space for that in every other area of our life. Because our society is so fast-paced and tends to run in masculine energy in terms of being more focused on doing, achievements, hustling, accomplishments, all of that external stuff. It's like, well, I might have this one anomaly, but that doesn't mean that, like, that's who I'm being. And the reality is, when we can access intimacy in our state of being, it really does transform every other aspect of our life. Like, it's radical, and it actually takes some bravery. We have to kind of take all of that, like, do power that we have in our masculine energy state and put it toward going inward. When we do that, it changes everything. It's radical. It feels like rebelling against society in a way, and then it creates so much more fulfillment.
So it sounds like you're saying that intimacy is gained from going inwards, from that feminine energy. And before we get to that, can you actually describe, because that's a concept I've heard before, like that difference between the masculine and the feminine energies?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not talking about being more male-like or being more female-like. It's referred to as masculine, feminine energy. It's also referred to as yin and yang energy. And so we're just talking about these two parallel but opposite energies that coexist and interact with each other at any given time in every scenario that we're in. This kind of polarity is everywhere around us. And so when we look at what is masculine and feminine energy, I kind of describe masculine energy is more focused on going outward, on external. It's focused on doing and achievement, structure, control, um, uh, forward moving, can be like a push energy. That kind of energy is what we refer to as yang or masculine energy. And then feminine energy really is the breeding ground for relationships. So again, part of where we find ourselves all hung up, feminine energy is more focused on being. It's maybe more still or calm. It's on sensation. It's on going inward, some of those more inner perceptions or perceptibility. And that's what we refer to when we're talking about feminine energies, maybe more of a flow than a push.
Yeah, and I can definitely see like what you were saying, how our culture and society is very leaning into the masculine energy that, your worth is determined by how busy you are, how much you're doing, how much you're achieving versus the feminine. I can see people seeing that as like that's lazy or should be doing more or things like that.
And our whole society is based on measuring ourselves. Like we think, okay, well, my worth is based on like I have to measure myself, and there's some sort of compare and contrast with others around me. But how do you measure feminine energy? Like, how do you measure the quality of your relationship? It's like very hard. How do we measure these sort of inner, intangible things? And so as a result, kind of society, the collective as a whole, has then deemed those as less important, unnecessary, and it's a real tragedy. Why I do what I do is because I see so many families suffering. Certainly divorce rates and all of that plays a factor, but we enter into these relationships, and we have these children, and we have this family unit that has the capacity to be the strongest unit that we're a part of, the strongest organization that we can pour ourselves into, that can support us and give back to us again and again forever, for eternity, right? And yet most of us aren't experiencing family as that, and we often go to, it's my fault, I'm screwed up, like these people, I can't be enough for them, et cetera, et cetera, when really it's more the conditions that we have been like plopped into in this human experience that have created this dysfunction. It's not because there's something wrong with us. We just haven't been given the tools, the awareness, and usually the tools and all that awareness is actually within us. We just also haven't been given the permission or guidance to be guided inward to that inner wisdom, to that inner voice that can show us how to be in relationship, how to be in family.
So what would you say, because you mentioned before that there's certain blocks or walls that people put up that prevent them from becoming more intimate in their relationships. So what are those blocks?
Yeah, well, let's see here. What are some ones that I see really commonly? Um, Women, stereotypically, we'll speak in some stereotypes here. Stereotypically will say to their partner, I want to know how you're feeling. I want you to tell me like really what you're thinking. I want to know like what's inside of you. And then as soon as their partner actually shares something, she shuts down and typically will either like run, flee from that, or go into fix it mode, or get upset about why is he complaining? Why is he, being so negative? Why doesn't he just do something about it? So it's like we're asking for that, and then he kind of knows. So unfortunately, stereotypically for men, they've been raised in an environment that constantly says, we actually don't want that from you. So he gets in a marriage and then she's saying, I do. But anytime he gives it to her, he is met with the same wall of resistance that he's been met with most of his life. So our men kind of have to do this tricky sort of like, refined. I'm trying to show her enough that she knows that I love her, but not actually show her stuff, because if I really showed her what I was thinking and feeling, she would freak out or she can't handle it. So it can be so exhausting for both people, right? And our women, I don't point them out to say, oh, we're bad or wrong doing that. We were raised in the same environment. So we crave this depth. We want their soul. We don't just want, some robot who, whatever, goes out and works a job and like, does work around the house or whatever. All those things are nice. Like, that's not all we want. But then when we get it, we've been conditioned to believe that our men need to be this strong, stalwart, et cetera, and that there's something wrong when they are expressing stuff that doesn't show that. So it's not our fault, but there's so many layers that we have to peel back. That's just one example. I mean, I could go so on and on with these examples. As a business owner, I often will see, we all kind of know that marketing and things are changing right now. And so I'll see people, we know that you can't just talk about your product, for example. You have to give them something about you. Your audience wants to know who you are, who's the person behind the product. But I see these people doing this, again, sort of like a refined, filtered authenticity. Let me just give them just enough here and there. And what that creates is they kind of find themselves on this pedestal where their clients now see them as like a god of sorts. And this is happening, I mean, all over the place. And then the person on the pedestal, the business owner, feels so isolated, feels like no one gets me. People only care about what I can do for them. No one actually cares about me or about like who I actually am. But it's because they've never felt safe enough to like break that open and just be real. So that's another example. So, then, you have these business owners who feel extremely isolated, have extremely successful businesses. From the outside, you would look at them and think, whoa, like they have all these, followers, people just eat their words, all this stuff. But inside, they are feeling so alone. And it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to have that sort of dichotomy among our clients and audience, etc.
Mhm. Yeah, I think those are two very relatable examples that you brought up, and I hadn't even thought of that aspect of even the intimacy between a business owner and their clients or customers. So would you say that's something that's important for somebody to have if they're a business owner or a leader in any shape or form?
Absolutely. I mean, we know that know, like, and trust is like the formula, but it's like, how do we create know, like, and trust? Like, it is getting so real. And again, we can only be as like authentic and genuine with our audience, with our customers, with our clients as we have been willing to be with ourselves. So if there's parts of me that I'm like, I hate this part of me and I'm going to do everything I can to then hide this part of me, like that is conveyed. People feel that even if they don't know that they feel that. Something I used to daydream about when I was a kid. Like, I really do think intimacy is some sort of like gift I've been given to just be a stand for, see things this way on the planet. As a kid, I used to daydream about if I could read people's minds and what it would be like if I could read people's minds. And hindsight, I'm like, that's because I wanted to know. I wanted to know them. I wanted to be intimate with them. I wanted to be like, what are you? What makes you up? Like, what are you really, beyond this, like, flesh and, presentation that I'm getting. And And I used to think about what would it be like if everybody's insides were on the outside, not our guts, but our like our inner what makes us up. And I actually feel like the world is going through a huge shift right now. And we all know, we all can feel it to some degree or another. And actually, what we're moving into is a more feminine energy paradigm where there's more equality with men and women and all genders, but where there's a lot more feminine energy than there has been for maybe thousands of years. So, as our world goes through this shift, I think we actually are kind of entering into that in a sense. And the reason is because so many people are doing this kind of intimacy work. They're getting to know their intuition, they're getting to know like the spiritual side of things, and therefore their perceptibility is increased. So they can sense when someone's being real. And I can't wait because the leaders of our future are actually going to be leaders that are aligned with their values. Where now we have so many leaders, and you think, I mean, in every category, right? Government, schools, even religious leaders, and it's like, yeah, but do you actually stand for something? Like, are you actually living in alignment, like with what you say? Like, who are you really? But the more that we do this kind of work, the more that we will see the reality of our leaders, and we'll, I think, herald a lot different leaders than we do now.
Hmm. That's interesting that you point out that things are shifting to a more feminine energy. What changes are you seeing that's making you say that?
You can see in the world changes. For example, 2020, 2021, and then 2022, the Great Resignation in corporate positions, because corporations have been run primarily in masculine energy. And it's very much like show up, be a robot, do the job we told you to do, focus on your performance, et cetera, et cetera. And people are looking at their surroundings going, I don't like this. I know I haven't liked this for a long time. And now I'm beginning to realize I don't have to tolerate this. I can create a living some other way. And they're going and doing something typically more heart driven. So a lot of people are checking in with like, wait, what do I actually want? Like people are waking up and actually asking their internal self some of these questions. Which, so the Great Resignation is a great example of that. But I also see just a greater, increase in people's interest in spirituality. I even think that, there's been also an exodus from religion, and I think that plays a role as well, because oftentimes our religion can be so dogmatic, so masculine energy, very focused on your performance and etc. So people are going, again, like, this doesn't serve me. But then they're like, but there is still something. And so then they begin this journey of searching inward. And so all of those are, that spirituality, desire driven, all of those are characteristics of feminine energy. And then don't even get me started on people's search of the divine feminine. That has increased like crazy. Like people's interest in, Mary Magdalene, what is the divine feminine, searching out who was Isis, who was Athena, who were some of these women, historical or mythological characters that have existed, that stories that I never heard because I only heard history, not her story.
Yeah.
So there's a great awakening for that too, that I think people are craving, like a mother connection.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And so, I heard you mention things about people becoming more in alignment with their values. And would you say that that is connected with cultivating more intimacy? That, like, that's an important piece of that?
Yes. I love this. Thanks for circling back to intimacy. Like, how does this all relate? Because to me, it's all a big interconnected web, and I can clearly see how it's all connected. But I appreciate your question because not everyone else can.
Mhm.
um, Yes, if we do the work of basically where I start with my clients and what process I take them through is first becoming aware of discomfort that you're experiencing. This is how we begin the journey inward. You become aware of the discomfort you're experiencing. Then you become aware of like what feelings that represents and how do you feel that in your body, like from the neck down. It's like a lot out of the head because head is very masculine energy, and more into our sensations, into our heart, into our essence, that kind of thing. So what's the discomfort? What's the feeling? And then we go into our feelings are actually guides to what we deeply value. So, for example, an uncomfortable feeling represents a value that's missing for us that we deeply hold. And it's not necessarily like a moral value per se. It's not like, truth is really important to me or whatever. It could be that, but it could even just be like, I'm really uncomfortable because this is too heavy. I want lightheartedness. Or I'm really uncomfortable because, myriad of reasons. I'm really uncomfortable because I want more connection. And that's actually what I really want. So when we become really clear, it's like kind of sifting through the surface desires. And what this process does is gets us to the true desires of our heart, which manifest in our values. And then we can kind of come to strategies and ideas to create what it is that we want and live in alignment in that way. And this helps us to, obviously, we're doing intimacy with ourselves the whole process. We're getting deeper, more intimate with understanding who we are, what we desire, what we value, what we're feeling. Certainly, just that knowledge allows you to then communicate that more with others. But it also just allows you to, when you can approach all that with like love and compassion and acceptance and like building a trust with yourself, then you're able to meet your partner with all of that as well, where it's like, oh, like I really want to see what's in you, and I can approach it without judgment. I can love it. I can accept it. I can see who you are, what you're made of, and it kind of allows us to drop some of the actual moral judgment that we carry in our day-to-day circumstances and just show up with integrity. Like, I'm living in integrity with what I value. Are you living in integrity with what you value? And how can we like do that more and more together?
Hmm. That's great. Yeah. And I can see how that really connects with that feminine energy you described of being. It seems to me like it's more of just like not trying to force things or let's say pull things out of people or judge the way that they're doing things, but it's more just being with that compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned, I want to go back to the gender stereotypes that you mentioned, because I think this can be the case, that example that you highlighted, that for many men, I think it can be challenging to feel comfortable opening up and becoming more intimate. Is that something that you have noticed, and what would you suggest for that?
Yeah, I do see this often. And what immediately comes to mind is a couple that I worked with a few years ago. And she was so ready for that closeness and connection. And he wanted it so bad too. But he wanted it so bad. Like, to the point that his sexual desire was driven by connection. If he didn't feel like really like accepted and cared for and appreciated by his wife, he had no sexual drive or desire. Like, he wanted it so bad, that true connection, right? But he wasn't yet ready and willing to kind of let those walls down because, man, I mean, he was running a huge corporation in the city, and he had, hundreds of people looking to him to have all the answers and etc. And then he's got this, his wife and his sweet, family where, they're asking for like him to like let all that down and just be and, have that tenderness. And he couldn't. He couldn't do it. He tried so hard. He went through the program. They did the, and they did experience some progress for sure. But recently she came back, and we've been doing a little bit of work together, just she and I. And it's crazy. Like, these years later, he is now brought to this place where he's fully ready. And they're having all these like breakthroughs. And she is like, sharing with me, like, I am so fulfilled. Like, we have connected so much deeper than we ever have. But from his perspective, I have a feeling, because I haven't talked to him, I just talked to her, that he feels like he's failing. He's been, sharing with her some of the deepest fears he has, big stuff coming up in his company, like being very vulnerable with her. And he probably feels like he's failing. So it sucks. It's like, our men don't have to feel like they're failing, because they're actually being vulnerable with what is. But unfortunately, like, again, society has brought in these judgments. So what I would say, to a man is, first you have to actually tell your wife, I want the closeness and connection that you want. But I listened to this podcast the other day, and I realized this podcast today, and I realized that I guard some of my most vulnerable things, some of the, deepest parts of me, because I am afraid that you won't be able to handle them. And so if I am going to share some of these things with you, this is how I need you to respond. Like, that's the kind of men, that's what we need our men to do. And we need, them to just really fully step in and own, hey, listen, I'm going to do this. And depending on how this goes, it'll determine a lot. And then we need to be very explicit with our partner about what we do want, how we do want them to react, right? Like, I would like you to listen, and I would like you to repeat back what you heard me say, just so that I know that you understand me. I would like you to try to put yourself in my shoes and see how this feels. Or I would really like appreciation, after I share this. Ask very clearly for what it is that you want, so that you can begin to build that trust together. And then, you might even ask her, like, if what I share with you triggers you or you feel scared, I need you to tell me that later. I need you to actually say, I felt scared about this. Not jump into trying to fix me or control the situation or calling my boss and trying to fix the problem or whatever. Like, this is what I need you to do. Be real with me in response. And that's the way that we can kind of create and cultivate that deeper intimacy. And a lot of times when I'm working with a husband and wife, I will tell the husband to remind his wife, like, you can trust me. Just trust me. Because we'll get scared as women, like, well, wait, what's going to happen? And, and we kind of can panic and freak out. And to just be able to say, can you trust me? Is so massive for women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are some really impactful tips. And I can imagine that would apply, regardless of your gender, really just communicating, when I'm in a moment where I'm being vulnerable or sharing things with you, this is what's helpful for me to hear from you, or this is how I would prefer you to respond in those moments. And then if somebody's feeling triggered so you mentioned them like identifying that either in the moment or after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, like, and again, this is asking for a high level of self-awareness. So she may not, your partner may not actually be aware that they've been triggered. They might not even, be familiar with what that term actually even means, or, that they're now experiencing a lot of discomfort that came in relation to what was shared. So many of us just aren't conscious, and we just react, and we don't even realize what we're reacting to. So it is asking for a higher level of awareness. And you're absolutely right. It does apply either way. If the woman is wanting to go to her husband and have a deeper conversation, that's exactly the same advice that I would share with her, to be able to do that. And then the person on the receiving end, it's really important to always be honest. Like, if you can't honestly express appreciation when appreciation was what was asked for, don't just fake it. That is damaging. So often we do that kind of stuff. We feel like we have to fake it, like we have to fake enjoying sex, we have to fake being happy in a situation, or fake, being grateful for a present that we didn't really want, or we do that stuff all the time. So don't fake it, because that is actually driving disconnection, not deeper connection. It's the actually opposite of what you're trying to create. Um, and so being honest, and very like self-owning is so key.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important point you bring up. And I'm wondering, what if, because I know a lot of my listeners are people pleasers. So what if you fear, okay, what if I'm honest and then I hurt the person, or it starts a conflict, or, whatever fear there might be?
And those fears are so legitimate, because the reality is, for one, the person you're talking to may not be very super conscious. So then you say something and then they just fly off the handle and react. So there's that hurdle. There's also the reality that we don't really know how to communicate. Like, we really struggle with communication as a whole. Human beings in general struggle with communication. So learning how to express what it is that you're trying to say is really, really vital. I usually teach people that if you go, so often it's like authenticity, right? You just need to be authentic and say what you're thinking and feeling. And then people do that, and they think that means like blaming the other person or crapping all over people around you with all your judgments and evaluations and everything. It's not. That's actually not even your true authenticity, because that's coming from your fear side of yourself. It's coming from like your limited side of yourself. So when you do this like kind of intimacy work, right, you're in tune with who you really are. You can kind of see, oh, I have a lot of stories, judgments, opinions, evaluations, and not all of them need to be shared. Some of them do. I even have a process with clients where I'll say, okay, you lead with this. You say, the story I'm telling myself is. And it's very clear that you are actively trying to disengage from this story, but you're sharing it anyway to maybe check and see if it is true or not, or just to be validated, like, yeah, I felt that way too, right? So it can be beneficial as long as you're not doing it in a blaming, attacking, reactive way. Um, yeah. So, wait, what was the question? I can't remember.
It was, if you are like a people pleaser, how would you address it? But I think that you address it, and I like what you said, with sharing the stories that come up for you. I think that's a great idea, because it can be really common to create these narratives of, everybody is judging me, or like, let's say if it comes to being authentic, or, I'm not good at relationships or intimacy, or I can imagine there's so many things that can come up for people depending on the situation, and being honest about that. I can see how that could cultivate more understanding in the relationship.
There's a really sweet example in my daughter. She's 9 and she has a really hard time talking on the phone. It's so funny because when she's with her friends in person, they just chitter chatter and they have a good time and it's like nothing. But when she's on the phone, something happens. She gets all frozen, and like all her siblings, like we'll listen to her phone conversations and we're all like kind of like cringing, like, oh dear. So she's been like, what do I do? Because we recently just started unschooling our kids. So she's not around her friends as much as she was. Like, phone conversations have become more important and valuable. And so I told her, What if you like she would end conversations and be like, "That was so awkward, mom. What do I do?" You know? And I said, what if you just told your friends, just text them and say, I'm really sorry. I don't know how to talk on the phone yet. It's very uncomfortable for me. And so if that was weird, that's why." And she's done that. And as a result, her friends have responded like, "Oh, I understand," or "That's okay," instead, where they honestly may have walked away from the conversation feeling offended. Like, I don't even know if Daly likes me anymore. I don't even know like what that was, right? But because she was willing to be vulnerable and just say, "I haven't figured out this phone thing yet," like then her relationships have gotten closer as a result.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, that's a great example. And you have shared so much value today. The conversation just kind of flew by, which is always a good thing. Um, are there any final thoughts that you have for our listeners? Let's say for somebody who's wanting to deepen their relationships or have more intimacy?
The number one thing that I would love to share with those who are listening is any part of you that you have felt like you have to sacrifice in order to fit into any relationship in your life is a lie. And I would just invite you to do whatever you can to reclaim those parts of yourself and gather up and make yourself whole again so that all parts of you can show up in your relationships and be honored. It is so fulfilling. It's like creating heaven on earth, and that's what we all deserve. None of us came here to shave off parts of ourselves in order to be happy or be in relationship with people. And so that's my invitation is recollect all those parts of yourself and never let them go again.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I understand you have, I think it's a free intimacy guide to share.
Yes, free intimacy guide at my website, www.melisakeenan.com, and it will take you literally through some of the steps and process that I've talked about on our chat today.
Perfect. And how can people find out more about you, connect with you further if they're interested in doing so?
Yes, the website is a great place to do that. I have a couple of spots open right now to work with couples, and as well as a women's program that I run. And so come to the website. You can also find me on Facebook, and I run a free Facebook group as well, Women Manifesting Intimacy. So I'd love to connect with anyone there.
Okay, perfect. And I will leave links to all of that in the show notes. But it was great to speak with you today, Melissa. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much.